Let me begin by thanking my very special friend and colleague, Amina Mohammed, Cabinet Secretary Amina Mohammed, for her hospitality, for hosting today, for helping to organize the day, and for helping to chair the discussions that we had today. And I would completely agree with her that it was extremely constructive, and I can talk about that in a few minutes. I began the day with a meeting with President Kenyatta, and it was indeed, as Amina said, very comprehensive and productive on each of the topics that we touched on, and we were quite comprehensive in those topics, talking both regionally as well as domestically regarding the elections that are coming up, regarding the economy, regarding security, and other challenges. But I had the pleasure of beginning that meeting, as I want to begin this press conference this afternoon, by congratulating Kenya on something no nation's athletes have ever before accomplished, and that is to win both the men's and the women's marathon races at the Olympic Games. Absolutely extraordinary. When I mentioned that to President Kenyatta, he promptly said to me, well, you know, we also had a hand in helping you win a silver because the person who won came from Kenya. And I said, actually, Mr. President, you did better than a silver and a gold. You gave us a president of the United States. So you can see we had a very, very friendly and positive beginning to the conversation. But in all seriousness, as a senator who represented Massachusetts for 28 years and who ran in a marathon, in the Boston Marathon years ago, I cannot tell you how much I admire runners from Kenya. I also asked the president to come and teach us how to run, you know, more. So it's quite an extraordinary record, and marathons are a big deal, especially in my hometown of Boston. So I fully understand how proud Kenya feels and should feel. I also want to express my deep appreciation to my fellow foreign ministers who traveled here today from Somalia, from South Sudan, from Uganda, and from Sudan. And we had an extremely important conversation regarding both the future of Somalia and South Sudan. And how we could meet these regional challenges together. And as Amina said, it exceeded her expectations. I think it's fair to say that we came out with a very clear agenda and with an understanding, and we broke away some hurdles that were standing in the way of progress, and I hope we'll move forward now. Now, while our focus today was on these challenges, we can't lose sight of the fact that there is a lot more going on in East Africa. And much of it is encouraging, particularly when it comes to economic and social trends. As is reflected by the young leaders that I'm going to meet with a little later this afternoon, there's really a lot of energy, particularly a lot of economic entrepreneurial energy. A new generation is coming of age that is much more committed to expanding economic opportunity, improving health care, preserving the environment, and developing renewable sources of power. So this is a very exciting time in Africa, and I'm pleased to be back here. Here in Kenya and throughout East Africa, there is a challenge that we face together. And that is that violent extremism is an obstacle to the hopes of the full living out of the aspirations described by the various undertakings that I described a moment ago. Yesterday, Al-Shabaab terrorists detonated an attack in an open market in Galkayo, Somalia, resulting in the death of 15 people and more than 80 injuries. And I want to take this opportunity to express the deepest condolences of the United States of America to all those who lost family members or who were wounded in that attack. And as the people of Kenya are tragically aware, Al-Shabaab may have had its start in Somalia, but it doesn't care about national borders. And the terrorists are a regional threat, therefore they demand a regional response. And that is one reason that our meetings today were so timely. In our discussions, we focused on three goals. The first is to maintain firm support for the Somali people and the government as they strive to protect their citizens, strengthen their institutions, and participate in a landmark electoral process. The second goal is to ensure that AMISOM, which is the UN mission in Somalia, has the resources that it needs in order to conduct, in partnership with Somalia, a sustained and relentless drive against Al-Shabaab. We need to ensure that when the terrorists are forced to flee an area, they are never able to return. And third, throughout the region, we have to enhance our efforts to secure borders, to share information about terrorist threats, to train professional security personnel, and to counter radical ideology. Let me make it clear, we have made extraordinary progress in Somalia. AMISOM has made progress. Somalians have made progress. The regional countries committed to fighting against Al-Shabaab have made progress. And Al-Shabaab has been beaten backwards. And the economy is growing in Somalia. And the government is gaining in capacity and taking hold. But obviously, we need to do more. And we understand that. And today we talked about that, doing more, and how we will do more in the days ahead. And we specifically agreed on a set of meetings that will take place shortly in order to up the effort, if you will, and complete the task to honor the progress and the sacrifices that have been made. In our talks today, I heard a powerful commitment from all of the participants to cooperate in fighting an enemy whose hate-filled agenda is the complete opposite of what the people in East Africa want. Meanwhile, we are also stepping up our efforts to address humanitarian needs. This afternoon, I am pleased to announce that the United States will be providing an additional $117 million more in support for refugees, returnees, and drought victims in the region, raising our total assistance just for this year to $265 million. And we will also contribute an additional $29 million to the UNHCR's new supplementary appeal in support of the safe and voluntary return of refugees to Somalia. I mentioned this to President Kenyatta today because I know he is focused on this challenge of returning people, as he should be, but obviously returning them under the rules and laws of the international community in keeping with the standards of the United Nations refugee treatment. We also reviewed the dire situation in South Sudan. There is absolutely no question, and we all agreed, those ministers here today, that we need to move forward with the deployment of a regional protection force authorized by the UN Security Council in order to be part of the UN peacekeeping mission in that country. And let me emphasize, this is not an intervention force. This is a protection force with a very clear mandate to be able to protect people for their access, their freedom of movement, and their ability to remain free from attack or ambush from any source whatsoever. It is supplementary to the sovereignty and the efforts of South Sudan itself. And I think we had a good clearing of the air today in the discussion that we had with the participants on this subject. At the same time, we urged all the parties to recommit in word and deed to the full implementation of the peace agreement. And the representatives who are here today from the government indicated their full preparedness to do exactly that. And what we've been witnessing in South Sudan up until the moments of this beginning of the implementation has really been tragic and in some cases even reprehensible. Warring parties have terrorized and abused non-combatants, especially women and girls. And more than 2.5 million people have been forced to leave their homes. 40% of the population is without enough food, and they're witnessing record levels of inflation in their economy. So help is urgently needed in order to save lives. And that is why President Obama asked me to come here today, to be here in order to help work with our friends to respond to this emergency, this crisis. Today, I am also announcing nearly $138 million in new aid from the United States to the people of South Sudan, and we are already the largest donor in the world to the effort to help sustain the people of South Sudan on a humanitarian basis with $1.6 billion that we have contributed. The new funds, the $138 million, will be used to provide food, water, and medicine to those in need. But I want to make this clear, and I particularly think it's important for the people back home who are engaged in trying to help. I'm talking about our taxpayers in the United States. We made it crystal clear that this is not forever. We're not just going to fill in a void. We're not just going to provide help incessantly if they're not willing to accept responsibility and do the things necessary to deliver to their people. That message was delivered loud and clear today. In addition, I want to make clear that part of our understanding today is that the parties in South Sudan will allow unfettered access for the delivery of this and other humanitarian relief. The overriding need in South Sudan is to reinvigorate an inclusive political process and to implement the reforms that are set out in the agreed upon peace process, the peace agreement, so that this young country can stand up its economy, create effective security institutions, and bring an end to the sectarian division and fighting. And every neighbor in the region is demanding the same thing. The leaders of South Sudan have to live up to their responsibilities. They have to put the interests of their citizens first, and they have to refrain from violent and provocative acts. And the time has come to replace confrontation and impunity with reconciliation and accountability. And the minister from South Sudan and the delegation here today committed that they understand that that indeed has to happen. Finally, I want to emphasize how deeply the United States values and respects our friendship with Kenya. Today, our annual two-way trade exceeds $1.5 billion, and U.S. investors are increasingly attracted to the possibilities here, especially in such sectors as energy, agribusiness, and ICT. Our governments work together on a range of issues, including climate change, where I might add Kenya is a regional leader both through its engagement in the international climate negotiations and through its own ambitious domestic efforts. On that note, I congratulate the Kenyan Parliament for recently passing legislation to create a National Climate Change Council to further drive climate action. And in addition, our nations also cooperate on ocean and wildlife conservation, expanding access to energy, particularly through President Obama's Power Africa initiative on supporting democracy, on fighting corruption, and on strengthening the rule of law. Let me just say that the rule of law matters particularly because in East Africa, as elsewhere, it's really hard in today's global marketplace to have prosperity or security without good governance. And that is why preparations for next year's national elections are so important. And I talked about them with President Kenyatta. I'm pleased to see that progress is being made in reforming the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. And I urge in the most emphatic terms that disagreements about policy and process be resolved through peaceful means. Kenya has come a long way since the elections of 2007. It is up to leaders on all sides to ensure that the violence that took place in the aftermath of that election is never repeated. And President Kenyatta could not have been more firm or clear in his commitment to this election process. The United States does not favor one party over another, but we strongly support a fair, accountable, transparent, orderly, credible, nonviolent electoral process. And we will do everything that we can to assist Kenyans as they work towards that goal. We also discussed our shared interest in combating violent extremism here in Kenya and the importance of ensuring that counterterrorism efforts are conducted in a manner that is fully consistent with international law and in keeping with our shared commitment to the preservation of basic human rights. In closing, I once again thank Cabinet Minister Mohammed for her hospitality, for, frankly, the skill with which she contributed to the discussion today, the thoughtfulness of her leadership, and I appreciate enormously Kenya's leadership in hosting today's meetings. And I want to express again my appreciation to my very busy and distinguished colleagues for their readiness and willingness to come here and meet today. They are part of a vital effort to coordinate ongoing efforts to provide for a stable, dynamic, prosperous, peaceful East Africa. And I thank everybody for their hospitality. Thank you.
Well, thank you very, very much for recognizing the prowess of our compatriots on the field, something we're extremely proud of and that we appreciate every day. In fact, we consider them to be the best ambassadors that this country has ever had. Thank you also for appreciating the colleagues that came to join us. They did it at very, very short notice, really short notice, which basically speaks about the esteem that they hold both Kenya and the United States in. Because it's not easy to cancel a foreign minister's agenda and fly out for consultations, but I think it also speaks to the importance of the issues that we're discussing to them. Thank you.
Excellencies will take two questions. One from the local press and another from the national media. So just shoot your name and the media you represent, and yeah, we're good to go. The first question.
All right, I'm Olive Barrows from Capital FM, and my question goes to Secretary Kerry. I'd like to correct you, first of all. You called AMISOM a UN mission, but it's actually an African Union mission in Somalia.
Correct.
But President Kenyatta has called or has asked the UN Security Council upgrade it to a UN mission. So I'd like to know how your conversation went in regards to that. And you spoke about elections. How exactly is the US planning to support credible polls in Kenya come August 2017?
You're absolutely correct. Even as I was saying it, I was saying that, what, it's a AU mission, but I was not counting on everybody here holding me accountable. I appreciate it. We actually didn't talk about changing its shape or form. What we did talk about, however, is augmenting it. And we talked very seriously about the need for the Amazon mission to finish the job. Now, as you know, the mission goes until 2018. It's now still 2016. And we believe that in the intervening time, before there is any need for a drawdown, we have an ability to empower the national forces of Somalia, which need to be strengthened in order to have a reduction in force of Amazon not be negative in its impact. And I think we all were agreed, and I know that both the Somali, I know that Kenya, and I believe the Ethiopians are prepared to work with the United States in order to put greater pressure on al-Shabaab in the meantime. So I feel confident about what came out of today's discussion as a way to see the Amazon mission complete its task. successfully. And I think that will be a great feather in the cap for African leadership and for the willingness of regional countries to take on major responsibilities on something that affects people far beyond just in this region, because terrorism affects all of us. So I hope that is going to be the outcome that we will see over the course of the next months. And the meetings that I referred to in my opening comments, I believe, will take place very soon and help make a difference in implementing what was talked about here today. Now, with respect to the election process here in Kenya, let me just emphasize that holding a free and fair, peaceful, credible election next year is a really critical step in consolidating Kenya's democracy and unlocking the full promise of the 2010 Constitution. I'm very confident from my conversation with President Kenyatta, he fully understands that. For him, he has made it clear there is no going backwards, and he only sees the future in a context that I think is very, very promising. He also understands, as we do, that holding a successful election is a whole of society effort. You need your government, your political leaders, your business community, all the people, the civil society, to come together to resolve differences, not through violence, not through, hate language or other kinds of talk, but with a real dialogue, with a real political discussion. And I think in that context, I made it clear, and I think the President agreed completely, because he's already taken steps to move in this direction, that Kenya must have a trusted electoral body that is capable of running that kind of transparent and credible election. You've already taken steps to do that. Before I arrived here, there's already proposals before your Parliament that will change commissioners and begin to move the process forward to give people confidence that the Electoral Commission is going to be what people want it to be. And I think that it is critical, needless to say, that everybody in the country feel confident about that process. Now, what is the United States prepared to do beyond the conversations we had today and our urgings of everybody to participate? We are investing over $25 million in this year in order to support your electoral process coming into next year. What does that mean? It means we want to strengthen your election operations. We want to have you have the ability to carry out election observation during the elections. It means we want to see the full participation of women and youth in the election, and that there are mechanisms there to support any kind of dispute resolution, so people have confidence that it's not a free-for-all, it's not left to some random process, there's a clear and orderly process in place. So we're invested, but in the end, this is your country, and these are your processes, and this is your parliament. We don't want to step on any toes. We're not doing anything that your government isn't comfortable is going to enhance the process and help them to build the confidence that your government wants. And we do it in a helpful and permissive way, and in no other way could it work.